On Thursday morning, the Oklahoma Department of Public Safety released an independent investigation into the execution of Clayton Lockett. Lockett was put to death on April 29th for the murder of Stephanie Neiman in 1999. During the execution, Lockett writhed, grimaced, and even mumbled a few times after he was supposed to be declared unconscious. The blinds were closed during his execution, and the media witnesses were not actually able to see or witness his death. Another inmate scheduled to die that night, Charles Warner, his execution was stayed through an executive order by Governor Fallin, and then she also asked for the Department of Public Safety to perform the investigation. Among the chief findings were that DOC protocol was inadequate and there were no contingency plans put in place to guide the execution team as to what they should do when an execution goes awry.
You know, it was determined and is in the report that those involved with the execution stated that they could have noticed the problem earlier if they had been monitoring the insertion site during that time. But you are correct in stating that the reason they didn't is the warden was concerned about Fender Lockett's dignity because his scrub pants had been cut away from him to gain that access, and that was their decision-making process and why they covered it.
We think that the IV was a big issue with the execution. Absolutely. Not having the visual, I think they probably could have spotted issues earlier than they did if they had had eyes on it. Absolutely, I agree.
There were also problems placing the IV. Traditionally, executions in Oklahoma are done with 2 IVs, 1 in each arm. There were reports that Lockett dehydrated himself. He also cut his arms with a safety razor. And as a result, a single vein was put in his femoral artery in his groin. Unfortunately, the execution team didn't have the proper medical equipment, including a long enough needle to properly place a femoral IV. As a result, the drugs leaked into his muscle tissue, causing him to writhe and grimace on the gurney.
We do have a number of recommendations that you've seen in there, sir, and whether or not DOC can get all these recommendations implemented and get this new protocol in place, I don't know the answer to that. Because the last thing we want to do is rush this and have an issue come up where we're not prepared for the next execution.
As part of the Department of Public Safety's investigation, several recommendations were made. Among them were revisions to Department of Corrections execution protocol, such as more adequate training for the execution team, a more robust supply of medical supplies, including needles and things like that, and additional drugs if necessary. And the Department of Corrections hasn't yet released any changes to the execution protocol, but that is expected to happen within the next few days, possibly.